Hey everyone, this is Mike, and in patch 5.3 we are going to be getting our first large-scale instance, the Bozjan Southern Front. Now this will of course be kind of Eureka 2.0 as they alluded to. So I thought I'd kind of talk about Eureka, talk about what I think was good about it, what I think was bad about it, what they could maybe change in order to make it better, because of course we know that the Bozjan Southern Front is going to be a little bit different. It is still going to be a large-scale instance like Eureka was, but there will be differences. Like for example, I heard them mention that there was going to be more of a questing aspect to it, like we're used to from the older relic weapons and that kind of stuff. But of course, Eureka is still going to be a big influence to it, and I thought Eureka did a couple of things really well. I think they could have improved on some others, and I kind of thought I would talk about those things in this video. So first of all, Eureka. The way that I experienced Eureka was mainly through Animals and Hydatos. Pagos and Pyros I did not do when they were coming out, because they just looked like the exact same thing as what Animals was. And then I basically only did those leading up to Hydatos, and then Hydatos I did when it came out as on content as well, so to speak. Now, when it came down to Animals, that was actually a very good experience for me personally. It was something new. A lot of people hadn't experienced this. Of course, it was supposed to be something like Final Fantasy XI, like leveling and that kind of stuff. And I'd never played Final Fantasy XI, so it was very new for me. It was fun to just run around with a couple of friends, trying to grind some mobs, trying to figure out what was going on. And it was really cool to see the community come together to figure out this piece of content, and that new websites would come to life. Like for example, the Eureka tracker, where you could track all of the fate spawns, all of the weather types and those kind of things. To basically keep track of everything that was happening in each specific instance. I thought that was really cool that those things came to be. Now, of course, when it came down to Animals, eventually the Fate Train would be the premier way for you to farm your relics. And for me personally, it was really fun because whenever reset happened on Tuesday, I would just go into Animals, and every time you kill an NM you would also get your weekly tombstone currency. So for me, that was kind of the way that I would cap my weekly tombstones. I go into Animals for like an hour or two, and then not only did I finish a new relic or something like that, but I would also be getting my weekly tombstones capped. So that was something that I really enjoyed. Meant that I didn't have to just spam like expert roulette once a day to get that done, and was really enjoyable for me. Now, eventually going into Pagos and Pyros, of course, can't talk about the beginning experience over there too much as I wasn't there for it, but there did seem to be a decline in activity when it came down to the player base trying to help out the instance, so to speak. Now, back in Animals, the Fate Train was very simple. You would spawn in, you would shout, invite for the Fate Train please, and everybody would just move around as a group. So you were basically running around as a group of 100 people through the instance, and that made for a lot of banter. Sometimes the people that were helping out were just like, of course, trying to spawn the Fate, but there were already a lot of people being AFK, and they would just kind of have some banter in between them. Now, of course, I do totally understand that sometimes being AFK was just a little bit of a necessity, because if you're a level 2 player or something like that, trying to spawn the level 20 Fate, you're not really gonna contribute anything really. You might not even be able to hit the boss, because of course with level scaling you get like accuracy and that kind of stuff. Or at least I think it used to be like that back then. But basically, as a level 2 player, you don't really have any business trying to help with a level 20 Fate, so I didn't really mind for people to be AFK here or there. Sometimes, of course, if I had just gone through the map and spawned all of the high level Fates with some people, and then like we're doing like the level 1 and 2 Fates or something like that, then I would just AFK for a few minutes here or there as well. To kind of rest my fingers or something like that. I thought that was a pretty good like understanding that the high level players spawn the high level stuff, and then the lower level players do the other way around, they spawn their low level stuff, and everybody can benefit from that system. Now going into Hydatos, I'm going to skip Pyros and Pagos because of course those were, I didn't spend as much time in them as I did in Hydatos. Now going into Hydatos, there was a pretty stark contrast. If I did not have my friends to help me through the leveling, because I leveled together by grinding mobs for quite a while with my friends, which was quite fun actually. But if I didn't have those friends to play with me, I'm not quite sure if I would have actually enjoyed Hydatos as much as I did, because I already thought Hydatos was a pretty bad experience compared to Animals, and then of course Pyros Pagos was okay, but of course there was less people playing it because it wasn't really the current content anymore. Now, the main issue about Hydatos, and sometimes Pyros as well, is that there is too much of a divide of what had to happen. Animal, or like Eureka in general, the content, was meant to be a community effort. You go as a group towards trying to spawn these different fates. When a fate spawns, you zerg together, you zerg the fate down, and then you move on to the next one, or at least that's kind of how the fate train functioned. Of course, you can do it a little bit different, where depending on what level you are, you try to spawn a different fate. In my opinion, the fate train itself worked a little bit better, because that meant that whenever a fate spawned, everybody was already there, and you didn't have to wait 5 or 10 minutes for everybody else to kind of get there in the first place. So I thought fate training was pretty good. Now, when it came down to Hydatos, there was no real fate train anymore. Every now and then you would still get into an instance and you would find a fate train, but more often than not, I found that people were just AFK. There was a bunny fate that you could do for potentially rewards, because it didn't actually earn you the currency that you needed to finish your relic. You could only get like some logos from it or some other stuff as well, like minions maybe. But basically, the bunny fate was there. Most people AFK'd there. If they weren't AFKing the bunny fate, they were AFKing in the hub town where you spawn into if you load into the zone, or they were inside of Baldician Arsenal. BA, I think, was a amazing piece of content. I'm really looking forward to them doing the next installment of that, because it's basically a raid type that we've never really had in Final Fantasy XIV before, and it was the first raid that really made me feel like I was inside of a raid layer. One of the reasons why I love playing Destiny 2 so much is because the raids feel like an actual raid layer. You go through these different zones, you go through these different fights, and you actually need to move together like a group to kind of take on these different things. And it was incredibly cool, and that's why I like Destiny 2 raids so much, and it's why I think they could have done a lot more with Final Fantasy XIV raids. I know 24-mans are pretty good for this, but of course when it comes down to the 8-man raids, you don't really have that at all, because it's just a boss fight that you load into and that's it. So going into Baldician Arsenal for the first time was a really cool experience. Took me like I think 3 tries or something to clear it, because it's a very different raid style as well, because of course if you died, you weren't guaranteed to get a resurrection of, because you needed those special logos, actions and that kind of stuff for it, which I think was incredibly cool. So really looking forward to the next Baldician Arsenal. Now they did make it so that the player base was a little bit divided. If a instance was being used to do the Baldician Arsenal, that meant that half of your player base in that instance was not going to be there for your fate train, and that basically led to a lot of people just being AFK, not really contributing to anything. And then if people wanted to go and try to spawn those fates, you would often be met with very little incentive to do so. Of course, you needed those fates in order to get your relic done, but there were a lot of people that just didn't want to help out, because they're just of the mentality of other people will do it for me and I don't get anything from trying to spawn those fates, so might as well let other people do it. And that's where my biggest problem basically with this content comes in. You're not incentivized to spawn stuff other than to get the fate itself. The fate is what you're after, and of course if nobody's trying to spawn fates, you might as well go try it yourself. But if you're on your own, then trying to spawn those fates, especially the higher level ones, can be a bit dangerous. And as you know, dying in Eureka would make you de-level, which is of course something that you don't want to get either. So that's why you kind of need to move around as a group, have a healer there that can res you, or like a red mage or a summoner or something like that. But basically, you needed to work together as a group to try to spawn those fates, but the group that spawned those fates was not rewarded for doing so, and then once the fate was there, everybody would come over, zerg it down, and that would be it. I think if they were to change it so that you would be rewarded for spawning fates, I think a lot more people would start doing it. Of course, back in Animus, there was a train, everybody always followed you around because there wasn't anything else to do in that instance. But then, of course, going towards the logos farming, Baldician Arsenal, that kind of stuff, people were doing different stuff, and then the fate train kind of became smaller and smaller until people just didn't walk around in a fate train anymore, and they would just be AFK at either the bunny fate or in the hub instance, and then there would maybe be like a group of 5 players or something trying to carry the instance towards the next fate or something like that. So I think if they were to just incentivize or reward people that are actively trying to spawn those fates, I think that would already be a big help. For example, one of the things that I thought about myself is maybe make it so that the people, or like the mobs that you need to farm in order to spawn the fate, have a chance of dropping the currency as well. Like for example, say that you need like for example, the fate drops 10 currency for your relic weapon, and then each mob that you kill has a 10% chance to drop 1 of that currency, for example. That would already make it so that a lot more people would start farming those mobs, because they have a chance of now getting the item that they need, not only from the fate but also from the monsters that spawn the Fate. Maybe they could do it a little bit differently, like for example, say you have killed 5 monsters leading up to the Fate, you get a buff, and then depending on how many monsters you've killed, your buff is going to get stronger and stronger, and then depending on the strength of that buff, or depending on how many stacks you have or something like that, I guess that would be the way that they would do it, you get a higher tier reward from doing the Fate itself. Like for example, how you have with the Forlorn Maiden, if you're doing normal Fates and stuff like that, then like when you kill the Maiden, you get an experience buff, so the next Fate that you do will give you bonus experience. I think they could maybe do something like that in terms of the currency then. So for example, when you have this buff that you get from killing the monsters, you all of a sudden get a bigger payout from killing the Fate associated with it. I think that would already go a long way to incentivize people. Now of course they did say that the Bozjan Southern Front or the next Eureka is going to feel a little bit different. There's still going to be mob grinding, there's still a big instance, but there was also going to be a bigger focus on questing and that kind of stuff, which I think would be really good, because questing is something that we quite are used to from the other two relics, from A Realm Reborn and Heavensward. I also enjoyed that a little bit more than just the Eureka grind, because my biggest complaint with Eureka was not only the laziness of the community, but also the fact that it was always the same thing. If you go into Animals, you are grinding Fates. You go into Pagals, you're grinding Fates. And guess what? The other two, you're also just grinding Fates. So it was too much of the same. And I think with some variety in there from those quests and stuff, and maybe from doing different kind of Fates, like maybe there are special systems in place that make it a little bit different, then I think it would be a pretty good piece of content. And then of course, if we have Baldesion Arsenal version 2.0 at the end of it to look forward to as well, I think a lot more people would be incentivized, together with maybe giving rewards for people that are actively trying to spawn the Fates, would already go a long way. So those are kind of my thoughts on Eureka and how I think where they kind of hit the mark and where they missed the mark, what they could do to kind of improve it as well, and then some stuff that I am expecting to see in the next Baldesion, not Baldesion Arsenal, in the Bozjan Southern Front as well. Really looking forward to what it's going to be, kind of curious to figure out what they are going to be doing with it, because I did kind of enjoy Eureka and I would like to see a better version of it for sure. But that's gonna be it for me. I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.